Live from the Fox 7 Austin newsroom. You're watching us right here on the Fox local app. I need to sit down, but I'm just trying to organize everything here. Off yesterday, so thanks for joining us on this Tuesday. We have a ton to talk about. If I can get this chair to move down. No? Great. Here, this chair is stuck. There we go. I'm coming down. Coming down. Obviously, a lot coming up with South by Southwest. We'll have all of that coming up in just a couple of days on Thursday. Everything getting kicked off there. We're going to have extended coverage of all that. We're going to have people out in the field. We're going to have people on the red carpet. It's going to be a lot of fun. I would say the main word there is fun. And so we'll have all of that. But before we get to all that, obviously so much to cover when it comes to the war in Iran. And we are calling it the war in Iran. I am anyways. But when you ask either the president or the Secretary of War or Vice President J.D. Vance, it seems as though those words can get mixed. And we've heard J.D. Vance call it the conflict in Iran. We've heard President Trump say, this is a temporary minor excursion, if you will. But we're heading into the second week of this, and there's a lot to uncover here. I will get on basically the latest from CENTCOM and what they are saying. We'll also have comments here from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth in terms of what he said on social media. We will also have updates from Caroline Leavitt's White House press conference earlier today, where she not only talked about the essentially demolition of the Iranian Navy, what this means for oil prices, as well as the timeline. Many of us wondering, okay, how long is this conflict and or war going to last? We were told 4 to 6 weeks. Where are we in all of this, and what is the progress? And then we'll also have a response from the Democrats, specifically a few senators, and what they feel about this and what they feel about what this means moving forward, and could we see boots on the ground. I also want to dig into a very interesting exchange that we saw on Air Force One. President Trump being asked about that horrific bombing that happened on a girls' school in Iran, and what that means, and who did what, and was it the U.S. that did this by accident? He, of course, coming out and saying, well, he thinks it was Iran. So we'll get into that. But before we do, I did want to get into a press conference earlier today from Greg Abbott, who is having this sort of powwow, if you will, here in Manor, if I can pull this up. And it's interesting because this is sort of turned into, for him now, not only just acting and being the governor on a day-to-day basis, but he's also having to run a campaign after the primary we had last week. We know he's going to be paired up against the Democrat on the other side, Gina Hinojosa, who is stepping away from the State House. But it's going to be a great match. I think Greg Abbott is fully prepared, and he's got so much to really tout about his record and what he's done. I think he's extremely confident in what he's accomplished, especially from an economic standpoint. So much of today, what he's talking about here has to do with his 5-point plan. A couple weeks ago, we talked about this a little bit, essentially what he's trying to do. And so, like I said, this has turned into not only him being the day-to-day governor, but he's also got to run a campaign as well. And so I think, what he did today is an example of that. So we'll listen in to what Greg Abbott had to say earlier. This is in Manor, and we will listen in. This is at Cafe 290 there. So. Well, I don't think you guys can hear this at all. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I will try and figure this thing out. We'll be right back. You're watching Austin Live right here on the Fox Local app. Welcome back to Austin Live. You're watching us right here on the Fox Local app. You can also, of course, watch us on our YouTube page as well. Just go to Fox 7 Austin on YouTube, hit that live tab, and then you can watch it. You can rewatch old episodes as well if you feel so inclined to do so. Before we went to break, I was trying to show you guys a press conference that Governor Greg Abbott held earlier today in Manor at the 290 Cafe, and this was considered a taxpayer empowerment event where he was going to outline his 5-point property tax plan, and I'll just kind of go through that since we weren't able to actually hear it in full there. But as I mentioned before the break, not only is Governor Greg Abbott having to be the governor day to day, he's also in campaign mode, getting ready for that general election in November. We do know he's going to go against the Democrat Gina Hinojosa, and certainly Greg Abbott, the favorite, and a hill to climb there for Gina Hinojosa. But as Rudy Koski told you guys last week, and as Mike Warren said it as well, she certainly has a hill to climb because economically, Greg Abbott has a lot to hang his hat on. So here's just that 5-point property tax plan, and then we'll get into the war and Iran stuff and any updates from there. First point, limit local government spending growth, cap spending increases to population growth plus inflation. So 3.5% or whichever is lower there. The second point, require voter approval for tax increases. Local property tax hikes would need 2/3 voter approval before taking effect. Number 3, let voters roll back taxes. If 15% of voters sign a petition, they could force an election to reduce local property taxes. Number 4, cap appraisal increases and change appraisals. Lower the homestead appraisal cap from 10% to 3% and move property appraisals to once every 5 years instead of annually. The last and final of the 5 points here, eliminate school property taxes for homeowners. Through a constitutional amendment, the state would take over funding public schools, potentially cutting property tax bills roughly in half. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? So supporters of the bill, obviously Republican lawmakers here on the GOP side, saying Republican lawmakers and conservative groups have mostly backed this proposal. Another group that would be the Texas Public Policy Foundation. They say the plan would make taxes more predictable and give voters more control over local governments. Another group, Americans for Prosperity, argue property taxes, quote, only go one way up and support tighter limits on local government spending. Some Republican legislators have already signed onto the plan, making it part of the broader GOP agenda heading into the 2026 election. Supporters say the plan would cut homeowners' property taxes dramatically, stop local governments from raising taxes without voter approval, and lastly, potentially cut tax bills by more than half if school property taxes disappear. Now, of course, like with anything else, there are critics on the other side of this. So Democrats, obviously the majority of them in opposition of this, saying it is a risk to school funding. They believe public education would be harmed by this because Texas is largely funded through local property taxes. If those taxes disappear, the state would have to find tens of billions of dollars to replace that revenue. Second point they make here, long-term budget risk. Experts say the state currently has a budget surplus that could cover some cuts, but if revenue falls later, Texas could struggle to keep funding schools and services. So certainly both sides of the aisle here, but Governor Greg Abbott having that press conference earlier today talking about his 5-point plan. If I can somehow miraculously get the sound up. See, can't hear it. I don't know why. I wish I could tell you. I do not know why. I heard it earlier. Not hearing it now. Still nothing. Nope. There he is, though. He was there. I can prove that. Okay, let's get into the war in Iran, the latest updates. So we got reports earlier today from the Associated Press. As many as 150 injured so far in this war. We're in the second week of this now. We do know that 8 were severely injured and another 100 and about 8 going back into action. And so certainly that's a good sign that of those injured, many of them going back into action there, which is certainly, I guess, what you'd want to hear. But the 8 severely wounded, something we'll keep an eye on. We do know that 7 U.S. service members have died so far. And we do know that this is an ongoing conflict, and we don't have an exact timeline on this either. So we're trying to exactly get what that timeline is and understand, is this a minor excursion like President Trump has said, or is this something more? And I'm sure many of you out there have been looking at not only gas prices, but also just the stock market in general and sort of this roller coaster ride we've been on. Because yesterday, we saw the price of oil go up and down like this, right? So early on in the day, you're looking at $110 to $111, for a barrel of oil. Then Trump says he believes the war is very much complete, pretty much, and then the oil price goes down. So you would assume some sort of PR save there, obviously, because Trump does not want to hurt the stock market. He does not want gas prices to be something that goes up. These are things he ran on: the economy, gas prices, and certainly, what your stock market looks like, and certainly what it means for your 401k as well. These are things that he wants to keep in line. But we also learned over the weekend that the regime change we had been talking about, if the U.S. was to go in and eliminate Khamenei, which they did, the Ayatollah, and 40 plus other of his senior members, who would then be the one to come into play? President Trump obviously said he wanted to have approval on this. That way, whatever moves forward with the future of Iran is one that is, in line with what the United States wants. We come to find out that the clerics involved with all of this in Iran move forward with his son, his second oldest son, Mojtaba Khamenei. So you essentially are going from an older Khamenei in his 80s to a younger Khamenei in his 50s, who, by all accounts, is just like his father in terms of what he wants to do and how he wants to operate. Anyway, so far, let me give you guys the total numbers. The war has killed at least 1,230 people in Iran, and at least 486 in Lebanon, and 11 in Israel. These are according to officials in each of those countries. So 1,230 in Iran, 486 in Lebanon, 11 in Israel. I do want to show you guys, if I can bring this up here. So just in terms of what's happened in terms of the latest things. God, we're having problems today, aren't we? There's a tweet here from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. He talked earlier today, obviously. And I want to pull this up. If we can get this. Here it is. Oh. How about... There we go. So this is from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth here. This was just a few hours ago on the Twitter machine, if you will. He said, at the direction of President Trump, CENTCOM Central Command has been eliminating inactive mine-laying vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, wiping them out with ruthless precision. We will not allow terrorists to hold the Strait of Hormuz hostage to the weakened Iranian regime. You have officially been put on notice. Interesting wording here. Now, he is, quote, tweeting, if you will, a post here from President Trump that was put on Truth Social. And the president says, I am pleased to report that within the last few hours we have hit and completely destroyed 10 inactive mine-laying boats and or ships, with more to follow, signed President Donald J. Trump. So obviously with these oil prices being affected, the reason being is the Strait of Hormuz is bringing in so much oil, throughout the world. And so when you're cutting that off and you're choking that there, you're not able to get that out there. So obviously from a supply-demand issue, the price of the barrel goes up. So that's what we saw over the weekend. But then we get reports that, okay, now they're going to start putting out mines to try and take out these ships that are taking the oil. But according to Hegseth here, he says that they have eliminated inactive mine-laying vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, which he says you have officially been put on notice. This is kind of this FAFO thing he does, F around and find out. It's kind of interesting how he talks. People criticizing him a lot over the weekend, saying he sort of sounds like a jacked up frat guy. Okay, so let's get into what Caroline Leavitt had to say on this, the White House press secretary. This is her talking about the Iranian Navy and essentially what the United States has done to it thus far. And President Trump said yesterday, if they were to stop everything right now, you could consider it a tremendous success. And much of that having to do with what she's about to say right here. We'll listen into the White House press secretary. This is her earlier today. Can you guys hear that? No. Yeah, dude, we got a problem. All right, guys, you know what? We're going to take another break because we got no sound. We got no sound. So we'll be right back. All right, I think we have figured out the problem here. So we've moved some things around. We've messed with this a little bit. Sometimes you gotta just, mess with stuff. So I think we're okay here. Not a great start to the Tuesday. Not a great start. This is what happens when you're not here on Monday. You get the slow start, got the day off in between. We come back on, things not working the way we want them to. That's okay. We will figure this out. Okay, let's go back to square one now. Okay, I wanted to show you guys this. This is Pete Hegseth here. So this is the latest in terms of the war in Iran. Okay, this is what we're getting from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, who I guess refrains himself from calling it a war, yet he is the Secretary of War, a name he changed from Secretary of Defense. Okay, let's start from the top here. At the direction of President Trump, CENTCOM has been eliminating inactive mine-laying vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, wiping them out with ruthless precision. We will not allow terrorists to hold the Strait of Hormuz hostage to the weakened Iranian regime who have officially been put on notice. And as I said, this is sort of his FAFO thing, F around and find out. And so this is the kind of the verbiage we get out here. I don't believe he sent that tweet in all caps. That's just how we're showing it. I know it makes it look like it's a all caps President Trump True Social post. But that's not the case. But what he is quote tweeting is here, if you look over to the left here, President Trump saying on True Social, I am pleased to report that within the last few hours we have hit and completely destroyed 10 inactive mine-laying boats and or ships with more to follow. Okay, so that was a few hours ago, but this was earlier in the day. And the reason President Trump has been saying this is a tremendous success is that because they have wiped out a lot of the Iranian Navy. And we have seen that in so many of the unclassified videos that they've been putting out on CENTCOM. I'll run through those after we hear from the press secretary here, Caroline Leavitt. So let's hope and pray that this works here, okay? Here's the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, on the Iranian Navy earlier today.
The United States is
Boom, there we go.
Annihilating the Iranian regime's navy, and we have destroyed more than 50 Iranian naval vessels, including a major drone carrier ship. None of the regime's vessels are operating in major regional waterways, and the Iranian Navy has been assessed as combat ineffective.
So that's Caroline Leavitt there talking about the Iranian Navy, saying they're essentially combat ineffective. They've taken out so many of their vessels there in the Navy. We have seen the videos on CENTCOM, obviously, and I will show you guys those. I mean, they're clearly, you can't really hear anything, but you can certainly see what we're talking about in terms of this. And we've seen this on the White House social media pages. I mean, they're posting stuff as though it's like a highlight tape. It's really quite interesting. And there's been some criticism against that because I think people are like, okay, this is war, this is serious, people are dying here, 7 U.S. service members are dying, why are you putting this kind of music over these things? But here's some of the video they released earlier today. So this is U.S. forces eliminating multiple Iranian naval vessels on March 10th today, including 16 mine layers near the Strait of Hormuz. No sound here, but after this, I'll show you guys some of the videos that I'm talking about. So when Caroline Leavitt is talking about this, and when President Trump is talking about this, this is what they are referencing here, these mine-laying vessels that would have put mines in the Strait of Hormuz there, which has been such a problem for the world getting this export of oil from out of the Middle East. And so here are some of the images of that. No sound, obviously. But here are those vessels just getting blown to hell. So anyway, so that's what they're talking about there. And so, of course, many people having questions about, okay, well, what does this mean for gas? What does this mean for oil? I had some people over the weekend joking with me because I posted about here in Texas the average price going over $3, which a lot of Texans here are not happy about that. I will tell you, since I moved here from California, I know that's a bad word, but the prices over there are out of control. There are some people telling me that in San Diego, Los Angeles area, they were seeing anywhere from $7 to $7.50. I mean, that's just bonkers to me. I have a friend in San Diego who said he saw $7. So obviously that's not something we're dealing with here, but we did see gas prices go up significantly within the past couple of days because of the conflict, because of the war going on in Iran. And so I will show you guys exactly what Caroline Leavitt had to say about the oil situation. And we've heard this sort of a short-term pain for a long-term gain thing. We've heard this from her. We've heard this from other representatives as well. And here's Caroline Leavitt talking about what this means for oil earlier today.
Rest assured to the American people, The recent increase in oil and gas prices is temporary, and this operation will result in lower gas prices in the long term. Once the national security objectives of Operation Epic Fury are fully achieved, Americans will see oil and gas prices drop rapidly, potentially even lower than they were prior to the start of the operation. And we will live in a world where Iran can no longer threaten the United States or our allies with a nuclear bomb.
Hey, that's Caroline Levitt there, the White House press secretary, talking about these oil prices, basically saying, this is a short-term thing, and she believes that if all goes well, if this war in Iran is, of course, won by the United States and they achieve the objectives they have laid out, she's saying there she believes the gas prices may go even lower than they were before the war in Iran started. I don't know if that's true. I don't know what that means. Is it going to be easier for them to control the flow out of the Strait of Hormuz there? We don't know. A lot of people also saying this weekend, well, this is why President Trump went after Maduro in Venezuela to try and seize the oil there. The most oil reserves, pretty much outside of anywhere except Saudi Arabia. This is a different type of oil, though. This is heavy crude. And so even if they could go in there, it's not like you can just go and turn on a faucet and get that oil flowing. You'd have to build infrastructure. You'd have to go in there, get that oil out, of course, take it to specific refineries. And I believe Texas has some of that here, but you'd have to go through specific avenues to do so. I believe specifically Chevron, to try and break down that heavy crude into an oil that can be refined into a gas that we can use daily. So that's a whole nother thing there. That would take years, one would imagine. You can't just shut off the Strait of Hormuz and then go, okay, we're just going to go over to Venezuela. That's why he grabbed that. That's why he got Maduro out of power there. So different situation with this Operation Epic Fury and what that means compared to Operation Absolute Resolve, which was, come to think of it, probably a more calm name compared to some of the other operations we've heard. Okay, so this is the final part here, and this is the question I think all of us are wondering is how long is this going to take? Operation Epic Fury, we're moving into, 10 days of this thing. When does it end? So Caroline Levitt was asked about that as well, so I want you guys to hear her response. Once again, this is all during her press conference early this morning.
So faster than anticipated. What is your current timeline for how long the war will last?
So look, as you know, Steve, the President and the U.S. military's initial timeline was about 4 to 6 weeks to achieve the full objectives of Operation Epic Fury. Again, to destroy their missiles and their ability to make them, destroy their Navy, permanently deny them nuclear weapons forever, and to, of course, weaken their evil terrorist proxies in the region. We know that the U.S. military and our brave warfighters are quickly and expeditiously executing these objectives well ahead of schedule, but ultimately the operations will end when the Commander-in-Chief determines the military objectives have been met, fully realized, and that Iran is in a position of complete and unconditional surrender, whether they say it or not.
So you could hear her end there saying, here, let's just listen to it again. She says, complete and utter surrender. Well, listen.
The military objectives have been met, fully realized, and that Iran is in a position of complete and unconditional surrender, whether they say it or not.
So she's saying whether they say it or not, they are in a position of surrender. I guess one would assume that if they've wiped out everything from a military standpoint for them, they would have no choice but to surrender, even if they don't publicly declare it or not. So I guess it depends on if President Trump, the Commander-in-Chief, and the rest of the U.S. military feels they have achieved the objectives they've wanted. If they truly want a regime change, you would have to imagine it would not be acceptable for them to have Ali Khamenei's son, Mojtaba Khamenei, be the one to take over, because you're just getting a younger version of what you just got rid of. So the cleric's deciding, hey, let's just put his son in. He's never held public office. He's never held any type of government position, but he is, his father's son. And so you're replacing Khamenei with Khamenei. So what is considered success in the grand scheme of all this? Now, this is just what's happened today, the latest updates today. I did want to go back on something that we saw a couple of days ago, specifically on Air Force One. So this is super interesting. This video is from the Associated Press. And in my opinion, I think this is probably the most fascinating part of what's happened in the 10 days since this thing has been going on. A lot of questions regarding this. President Trump asked point blank about this. This is a reporter from the New York Times. President Trump hates the New York Times. I will say they're quite critical of him, so he doesn't like them. But the question being asked here is there was a school hit, a girls' school, from my understanding, and you've got 160 plus people being killed in this. And it would appear, at first report, this was a mistake. They thought it was something else. A missile gets fired on this. This is a Tomahawk missile, a very specific missile. Not everybody has these. But listen to what President Trump has to say when asked about this.
Did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war, kill 170?
No, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Still
But
investigating?
the only side that targets civilians is Iran. We think it was done by Iran because they're very inaccurate, as you know, with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran.
Right there. So he says they're investigating. He believes, his opinion, he believes that it's them. But if you listen to the very end here, he gives more of a statement.
Whatsoever. It was done by Iran.
It was done by Iran. Okay, so in order for that to happen, it raises a lot of questions. Number one being, how did Iran get a Tomahawk missile? Only the United States, the British Royal Navy, Australia, and I believe the Netherlands has this capability. So even if Iran gets it, what are they launching it off of? Do they even have the capacity of that? So it raises a lot of questions as to, if this was in fact Iran, where did they get this missile? How did they launch it? With the investigation going on, Caroline Levitt gets asked about this, and she says, well, the president is allowed to give his opinion, I guess. But when it comes to something like this, and you've got innocent people getting killed in all of this, I don't know if it's safe to give an opinion in that way, because people want answers. People want to know what happened here. And so this is something that President Trump will certainly have to answer to. And he was then asked about it again. The same reporter said, why are you the only one in your administration saying this? And he said, well, it's still under investigation. This is what I've been told. From my understanding, this is what's been known. But he said he would be okay with whatever the investigation turns out to say. Whether or not they release that, whether or not they disseminate that, that still is left to be determined, I guess you could say. But a very interesting question there by the New York Times, because it's a good question to say, hey, why are you the only one saying this? Why is nobody else saying this? And I think he's trying to do that, obviously, because Trump is all about PR and how is this being perceived. Doesn't want it to look bad on the gas prices, doesn't want it to look bad on the stock market, and certainly doesn't want to be seen as someone who accidentally fired a missile into an area of innocent people, 160 people. I did want to go to Nate Foy, who's also been covering this and been doing a heck of a job. So has Trey Yingst. I mean, Trey Yingst has been just absolutely phenomenal in this. But Nate Foy has been out there as well. And I wanted you guys to listen into some of his latest reporting here from Tel Aviv. They've got a bureau out there. And so I want to listen into him in terms of what are some of the latest reports here. And he'll be able to tell you guys straight from Tel Aviv, Israel, exactly what's going on and what it means moving forward for the United States. We'll listen in.
We've been here for almost a week now. And just to kind of give you an idea of what it's like here, several times a day, Iran fires ballistic missiles here. The sirens go off. We get an alert on our phone, and then about 5 or 6 minutes after the alert is when the sirens go off. And then generally you'll hear interceptions above. So Israel, as you've probably heard about, has a very effective air defense, a 4-layered air defense, and they have the Arrow 2 and 3 system that work in conjunction with the Patriot missile defense system and the THAAD missile defense system from the Americans. And then for closer range targets, they have the David Sling and the Iron Dome, which is more predominantly used on the northern border with Hezbollah. And that's a little bit different because it's so close that the sirens and alert system doesn't really work quite as well because you just don't have as much time. Whereas Iran, if they fire a ballistic missile here, it takes about 10 to 12 minutes to get here, so you can kind of plan a little bit. So this is the Fox News Tel Aviv Bureau. So we can stay here. We got a little bit of cover. We have our vest and our helmet in case things start happening here. But the update on the war, the newest from the Pentagon today, we're learning the cost of this war with 140 U.S. troops injured so far, 8 of them severely, on top of the 7 who have been killed. And we got a briefing from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth this morning. And he clearly defined the objectives of this operation, and one of them is to destroy Iran's ballistic missile capability. We heard from President Trump last night saying that the U.S. has reduced that capability by 90%, leaving 10% left. And earlier in the day, we heard Secretary of State Marco Rubio say that we were well on our way to destroying Iran's ballistic missile capability. However, as we have seen throughout the day here in Tel Aviv, it still exists. Just about an hour and a half ago, we had another Iranian ballistic missile attack here in Tel Aviv, and something that has sort of changed things as far as the risk here in Tel Aviv and other parts of Israel is, according to the IDF, and we have seen some evidence of this, Iran is firing half of the time cluster munitions, which is when the warhead on the missile breaks apart into several bomblets, smaller explosives, that then fall to the ground in clusters. And the reason why this is such an issue for Israel is that it's more difficult to intercept all of these different fragments, so it's more difficult to defend against. We have seen people killed. Yesterday, an 11th Israeli citizen was killed at a construction site. So that has become a big issue here in this battle with Iran. The second main objective that the Secretary Hegseth laid out this morning is destroying Iran's navy. And President Trump said last night the U.S. has sunk 51 ships in the Iranian navy, including a big drone carrier ship. And that is particularly important because the Iranian Shahed drones are more difficult. I talked about the cluster munitions. Those are very difficult in the form of a missile. But the Iranian Shahed drones are also very difficult. We've seen these in the Ukraine-Russia war a lot. In fact, Ukraine is sending some experts to different countries in the region to teach them how to defend against these Iranian drones. And not only are they difficult because they operate differently than a missile, but because they're a lot cheaper than a missile. So you have these $1 million missiles intercepting these $30,000 drones, which over the course of a war is a big problem. So especially with concerns that the United States may not have a very deep pile of missiles. Now, the Pentagon comes right out and says that's not true, that they have as many missiles as they need. But we are seeing a shift in strategy at the same time where the U.S. is relying more on its bomber fleet, utilizing the B-52, the B-2s, and the B-1s to strike these targets in Iran. So we're seeing that on a daily basis. The third objective that Secretary of War Hegseth laid out is permanently denying Iran's ability to ever get a nuclear weapon. And our Trey Yingst talked to President Trump on the phone overnight, and he shared that Iran was actually building another nuclear site after Operation Midnight Hammer, where the U.S. struck 3 Iranian sites. So they were working on a fourth that President Trump said was even deeper underground, where the U.S. initially used those B-2 bombers that I just talked about to penetrate those bunkers and destroy those nuclear facilities after the talks with Iran just didn't work out.
Can you hear me now? That was Nate Foy there talking about the latest in terms of the war in Iran from Tel Aviv, Israel there. And Fox News sort of has this bureau set up right there overlooking the city. And over the last 10 days, we have heard them giving live reports from there. And at the same time, you'll see Trey Yingst wearing a helmet, hearing sirens, having to get out of the way, having to move. And of course, they update as best they can. But the good thing is for the missile to be launched from Iran to Israel, you're talking 10 to 12 minutes there. So there is some time to prepare. They do put out a warning, and then they can sort of go from there. But really interesting there from Nate Foy talking about the logistics of the war, meaning these drones that they're dealing with here are much cheaper than these missiles. And although they may not be as deadly in terms of an efficiency standpoint of what they can do with these drones, over time, you're saving a lot of money. You're saving a lot. You're talking millions of dollars here. These drones that are a fraction of the price of these missiles. So a lot of people also concerned about the United States missile supply, specifically because of how much help they've given Ukraine in this Russia-Ukraine war and what this means for the United States moving forward. But certainly their air superiority and what they've done with the naval vessels, you can't argue with that in terms of the success. And I think when President Trump talks about the tremendous success, he's specifically referring to the fact that from a naval and air force standpoint, Iran just not being able to stand a chance against all of that. So if there are any more updates on that, we'll check back into it. I did want to just reiterate, we're talking 140 to 150 U.S. soldiers injured so far in this war. We do know that 8 severely wounded, 7 have been killed, unfortunately. If those numbers change, I will keep you guys updated as best we can. We're going to take another break. When we get back, I do want to get into some drama regarding the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, there's always drama there. And also, spring football starting for the UT football team. I know it seems like the season just ended. That's what happens with college football, man. As soon as the season ends, we've got the playoffs. We've got the college football playoff now. We've got the national championship, which it seems like that thing takes forever to finally play. And then we move right into spring ball coming into March. And so we've got some great images. Everyone wants to see the brand new shiny toys and what the Longhorns have. And so we've got some great skill position players. I just talked to our sports director, Dennis De La Pena, saying, hey, Cam Coleman, the wide receiver transfer from Auburn coming over here, he's great. And then we got 2 new running backs as well. And people are very excited about these guys, both guys that can put up 1,000-yard seasons. So whether or not UT's address that run game, we'll see. You got to have an offensive line as well. So we're going to take another break. If anything changes in the break, we'll be sure to cover it. You're watching Austin Live right here on the Fox Local app. You can also watch us on YouTube Live as well. And we've got our little TikTok simulcast as well, Alec on Fox 7, if you want to get more of a behind-the-scenes look, if you will. We'll be right back. Hey guys, welcome back to Austin Live right here on the Fox Local app. You can also watch us on YouTube as well at Fox 7 Austin. I want to get to some breaking news now from our sister station, Fox 4 in Dallas. They are talking about some tornado warnings for Stevens County and Palo Pinto County. So let's listen in to what they have to say up there.
See the potential for the strongest winds. And what's going on there is, again, the winds are causing that portion of the line to accelerate farther eastward. That's a sign that there's strong wind, literally pushing the rain outward, accelerating it faster than other parts of the line itself. So that tells us visually with that radar cue there that, boy, there could be some strong winds there. So we've got the severe thunderstorm warnings for much of Stevens County, probably the western two-thirds now of Palo Pinto County, including Strawn and Chad, and just about all of Eastland County as well, with that wind and hail threat. Although clearly the largest hail is with that lead supercell. That's the long-lived rotating storm on the east side of Breckenridge right now that's producing the largest hail and likely the strongest winds, and also the potential of a developing tornado.
Yeah, and I continue to look at that, and I think we're losing more and more, at least the view of the tornadic part of that storm, the rotation, at least in the lowest levels of the scan. I'm sure they're very much still existent in the...
It looks broad now to me. Yeah.
Because now this is Fort Worth radar, so we're looking at a different angle. And remember, that was real tight for a second. The greens and the reds were really close and really high. Now we're seeing that. And now just coming from Fort Worth Weather Service, they're going to let that tornado warning expire once the time comes up with it. I believe that warning officially went till 7:30. So hopefully that means that the tornadic threat with that is going down.
Yeah, and again, these things tend to be cyclical in nature. This was the same storm, if I'm not mistaken, that did, produce some rotation earlier. And so that rotation tends to strengthen over time. It gets tighter, and that's when the National Weather Service usually gets really concerned, and they issue a warning. And now it looks like that rotation has weakened, and it's not as tight as it was before. So that rotation's kind of broadening out a little bit. And when that happens, the tornado threat tends to really lessen. And so hopefully that's a good, encouraging sign, at least short-term sign with this particular storm.
Yes, indeed. Certainly good to see at least the tornadic rotation with that come down, though these storms are still very, very mean. Again, potential is there for some gusts reaching up to 65 miles per hour because we saw that 67 mile per hour range. So let me go ahead and put a big track on this here and put it at about 45 miles per hour. And you can kind of see where that takes you. I want to include Stephenville in there. It doesn't want to trigger. There we go. And so that kind of gives you a heads up for folks in Palo Pinto, Parker, parts of Erath County, that this could be knocking on your doorstep between that 8, 9 o'clock time frame.
Yeah, and this is, about the time that we said, for our western counties in that 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. time frame is when we expect the most active period of weather. And so looking on the outer edges there, Mineral Wells at after 8 o'clock, Stephenville, 8:24. You can kind of extrapolate, and as we head closer to 9 o'clock, and certainly by 9:30, that's when I expect western portions of the Metroplex to see this line of storms pushing in from the west, bringing the wind and potential hail threat. Over time, I think, as we go through this evening, this is...
So you guys are listening to a live feed there from Fox 4 in Dallas talking about a tornado warning, which is expected to expire in just about 8 minutes at 7:30 Central Time. That's for Stevens and Palo Pinto County. Them talking about it there, saying they believe that will expire. It doesn't look like it'll go past that. One of my producers just now telling me they have another story here to discuss, something that I think a lot of us have been on high alert about, specifically because just a week ago, last Sunday, we saw what happened here in Austin with that horrific mass shooting at Buford's. And so this is coming in now from Houston, and I just want to give you guys an update. It says, update, suspect Jeremy Chavez has been held in jail on a $250,000 bond. His next court date is tomorrow. Next court appearance is tomorrow. Let's see here. On March 9th, deputies with Constable Mark Herman's office responded to the 21900 block of Bronze Leaf Drive in reference to a bomb threat. where the caller stated he planned to detonate explosive devices and conduct a mass shooting. Upon arrival, Chavez was detained on scene, and upon a search of the residence, several rounds of ammunition, an AR-style rifle, and bomb-making components were located inside the residence. This is from Constable Mark Herman now. Quote, Jeremiah Chavez was arrested and booked into the Harris County Jail for unlawful possession of components of explosives. At this time, his bond and court information has not been set. Unbelievable here. So certainly a scary update, but a good update. We do know here is the mugshot of Jeremiah Chavez right here, if I can pull this up. And this is him right here. This is from Constable Mark Herman. Is that his date of birth? 709? Wow, very young guy here. So this is Jeremiah Chavez. I mean, only 20 years old, not even 21 years old, making this threat earlier, as I mentioned right here, saying he's going to detonate explosive devices and then conduct a mass shooting. Terrifying. And they were able to book him, and they found an AR-style rifle and bomb-making components. So thankfully nothing bad happening, but we do know that this was put out there, and what we hope is preventing a horrific incident like we had here in Austin just last week. We, of course, know that Buford's opened on Friday, and I think a lot of people were wondering, will they ever open again? Is this business going to move forward? It appears they are. Other local bars in the area, as we told you Saturday and Sunday, trying their best to give back, saying, hey, we're a bar as well. We're a community here. We don't want to see a place like Buford's go down, go under because of what happened. We want to try and instill some sort of community and response. And so many of the sales from Victory Lap, from West Campus, as well as the Rainey Street location, saying a portion of all beverage sales, food sales on Saturday were actually going to go to Buford's victims, staff, anyone that was negatively impacted by this. We do know that Buford said 100% of their sales on Friday night would be going to the victims as well. And so there's been a tremendous positive response from the Austin community because of what happened. We do know that 3 people died: Savitha Shawn, Ryder Harrington, and 30-year-old Jorge Peterson. The other 2, 21 and 19 years old, just kids, really, students in college. We did hear from Jorge Peterson's former fighting coach as well, just saying just horrible that life was taken so soon. He only moved here a couple weeks ago. And then Savitha Shawn, a student at UT Austin, we showed you guys last week her memorial by some other students as well, just heartbreaking. And then Ryder Harrington, a Texas Tech student, only 19 years old. And so just terrific. But thankfully right here, it looks as though the Harris County Constable Precinct 4 was able to come in and take care of the situation here with Jeremiah Chavez, preventing what could have been another horrific incident as well. So some breaking news there out of Harris County. We'll go back in and check on Dallas in this severe weather. We do know there was a tornado warning. I'm just going to let this play out until we go to our next thing. We will see you guys tomorrow right here. You're watching Austin Live on the Fox Local app.
Storm watch right now. If I was a betting man, though, I would say that they would probably issue another tornado watch based on some of the low-level turning of the winds that we've seen there.
I certainly agree. And there's the tornado watch. It's outlined there in the red. Now, within that, we have 2 severe thunderstorm warnings. I believe, it looks like they allowed that tornado warning to expire that was in part. And they actually canceled it early looking at it because I believe
I can't view that, though.
So thankfully that has been canceled early. But as well, we have a new report coming in that there was baseball-size hail observed in that cell.
All right, guys, we're going to switch over to something else. I just got word that we have another shot in Oklahoma of a potential tornado situation. This is from a helicopter from my goodness. This is from a helicopter here in Oklahoma. A potential tornado that we could be watching unfold here. Horrifying. Once again, if you're just joining us here, I was just informed that we have a helicopter shot here in the Oklahoma City area. Severe weather going throughout North Texas into Oklahoma as well. There are some tornado warnings in North Texas, Stevens County, Palo Pinto County until 7:30 p.m. Central Time. This near Oklahoma City here, the tornado, from our understanding, has not touched down, but you can see there sort of it looks as though it's forming. This is from a helicopter shot right here. Just terrifying images, and we hope everyone is okay in the area and has been warned of this. But this situation unraveling here in Oklahoma. We've only got about 15 seconds left. I'll see if we stay on this.